everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. This is my first. You're like, Dave, no, this is not your first. You've done many episodes. No, it's my first time ever having someone on from PodMatch. And I'm nervous because I got to step up. Joel's here. He's a great podcaster. He's been on PodMatch forever. He's going to be on Alex Sanfilippo's show. So it's like a superstar in podcasting to me because he's doing things that I haven't done, and I'm proud to have him here. Joel, welcome to the How to Podcast series as my guest co-host.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I'm probably more nervous than you are now because we were just talking pre-show, and you've done a lot of stuff that I haven't done. And being the first person from PodMatch, I know there's a lot of good people on there that I'd like to have you come into contact with. So I don't want to give a bad first impression. So I will do my best to represent the good people of PodMatch.
I love it. Awesome. And behind you on camera, I see guitars hanging on the wall. I have all mine over there in cases off camera. And to my wife's chagrin, I have way too many of them. And I just tell her this. This is how I kind of get around it when I want to go get another guitar. So maybe my 10th guitar, if my wife's listening. I haven't done this yet. I just tell her, like, hey, how many pairs of shoes do you have? Do you have one pair of shoes that you wear for all of your different things that you do? No. If I'm going to go out, I have this kind of pair of shoes. If I'm going to go running, I have this. So it works. Sometimes you need a different guitar for different things, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to get some kind of... Okay, good. All right,
I attempt to use that same argument myself, but I get some pushback. Shoes take up less space. Shoes are less expensive, so on and so forth. But she's pretty good about it, honestly.
So the agreement we have then is whatever I spend on guitars, she gets the equal amount of money to spend on something for herself.
Ooh.
So everything costs me twice as much.
Yeah. We have our own money. So we put things together to pay bills, and then we each have an allowance. So unfortunately, she can buy a lot more shoes than I can buy guitars, but it is what it is.
I love it. Joel, tell us about your podcast and how long have you had it?
Yeah, so my podcast is From Nowhere to Nothing. We've been going since 2018, so 6 years. We try to do it weekly. Life is busy, though. We're both real busy guys, so sometimes we don't get to it every week, but we're up at 170 episodes, something like that. And it's a philosophy podcast. What we do is we usually try to take one or two words, and we talk about it for an hour. Right. And so the first part of the episode, we look at formative aspects of a topic, right? Like what philosophers have said about it throughout history. In the middle part of the episode, we sort of try to hash out details about it, thinking about in terms of the historical context and the current modern scientific context and all the other different factors, what this thing means to us now. And then we spend the last part of the episode looking at speculative elements, right? Asking questions about, all right, well, given what philosophers have said throughout history and what we've discussed today, what does it mean for humanity in the future, right? And that's sort of the essence of the whole show. We started out with just 10 topics on, 10 episodes on the biggest topics like God and time. And, after that, we've delved into all kinds of things from, deep things like causality and mereology were our most recent. But we've looked at Disney princesses and entertainment franchise reboots, right? Our whole sort of philosophy is that everybody is a philosopher and anything is philosophical, right? If you just do it the right way. So that's kind of the show.
Wow. Okay. So that means you're quite a deep person. By default, I would think, to be into talk about this on a regular basis. Is that kind of who you are as a person outside of the podcast?
Yes, absolutely. My friends call me the robot because I tend to be pretty unemotional, kind of even keeled, and I don't do a whole lot of small talk. So I'm an introvert, right? If I go out in public, most of the time I stay pretty quiet. So my wife, my friends, they're all extroverts, right? The joke is that I've been adopted by the extroverts, right? You need somebody who's persistent enough to come along and say, hey, this guy looks like he doesn't want to be talked to. I'm just going to talk to him until we're friends anyways, right? And eventually that's what happens. But so I'm always, I've never been real good at the small talk or anything like that. But if you want to talk about, hey, does God exist or what's the meaning of life? Yeah, that's my kind of thing.
Yeah. Sit down. We're going to have a conversation in that moment. I love that. I identify with you as well. I'm the person who goes to an event with my wife. She lights up by a crowd. I'm like, okay, we've been here 3.5 minutes. Can we go now?
Yeah.
Like, are we done? Like, I'll get the car started. Like, no, come meet my friends. Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
And it's funny, people think that, that podcasting seems like such a strange fit for people like us, but I think in some ways it makes more sense, right? Because a lot of it is one-on-one conversations with somebody else, or just you talking into a microphone sometimes, as opposed to being in a social group with different dynamics or in front of crowds or that sort of thing.
I think from my talking to other podcasters, I think extrovert podcasters really struggle doing solo episodes by themselves because there's nobody here to feed off of.
Yeah.
There's no humanity in the room, and they just find it so hard to sit down by themselves and talk to a blank wall because they light up by being around people. And as introverts, we're like, this seems really simple to me. I just get on, hit record, and talk.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's so hard for you. Because we're wired differently.
Just take all the thoughts that I normally keep inside and let them out. Yeah. Makes sense.
So maybe that's our superpower. I don't know.
Yeah, could be.
There you go. So everyone go hug an introvert today, even if they tell you no. Because we need it. We need those people coming around us. It balances us out a little bit.
Yeah.
I balance my wife out. She balances me out. It's a good combo.
Yep, absolutely.
I love it. So what are you seeing in podcasting, Joel, that encourages you? Like, how are you building community through your podcast? Give us a little bit of thoughts around what's working for you right now.
Yeah. So, like I was mentioning pre-show, I'm the world's worst marketer, right? I don't do a whole lot of social media. Just for some background, I'm somebody with a lot of hobbies, right? I'm working on a PhD and I'm on the board for the local government. And I am a musician that makes albums and a painter. And I've got a book coming out here in a couple weeks. So I've got a lot of hobbies. So I don't like doing anything that isn't fun. And marketing is not fun to me. So my show from the beginning, all I've ever done is hit click to distribute it and let nature take its course, right? So, and I think what that demonstrates is that persistence in podcasting is really the number one goal, right? If you're getting into it to make money or you're getting in it to collect followers or that sort of thing, it's going to happen at too slow a pace for you to make any headway. And that's why the majority of podcasts don't make it 10 episodes, don't make it 50 episodes. But if podcasting is something you genuinely enjoy doing, right, or the conversations you have or for the topics that you get to study and present to your audience, those sorts of things, well, then it's not work, right? So you can just get on, you can do it. It's always a good time. And that's the way it's been for me, right? And so over time, collected an audience, right? Been heard on all 6 continents and have, been invited to do some different things. So it's been really, really great. Could it be something much bigger than what it is? I'm sure it could, but that's never been the goal, right? I was never out to make money on my podcast. I don't make money on my podcast now. People have offered to, pay me to run advertisements and do things, and I've turned them down because it's just not in the spirit of what I wanted it to be, which isn't the case for everybody, right? There's no right or wrong way to do it, but it all depends on what your goal is going in.
The one thing that I did for my show, like I have a full-time job. I'm doing this on my days off. So I'm self-funded. Again, same thing. I don't have any commercials or anything. I'm not going to get a mattress ad or a supplement, nothing. Because I find it does break up the conversation for me as a listener. And, I like to pull my phone out, hit the skip button a couple times, not a pain in the butt, but after a while it's like, really? I don't know. I like to not have it in my show. And that's my personal choice. If this works for you, awesome, go for it. Make money. We need people to stick in podcasting if that's the thing you need. For me, though, I did set up a Buy Me a Coffee. And the reason I did it was not really for the money that I could make from it, because again, I don't need it for my show, but the engagement piece where a listener to the show was like, wow, having Joel on, that was a great conversation. I wish I was some way I could say thank you. It's kind of that glass of water at a job interview. Hey, can we get you a glass of water? My background's in HR. I always encourage everyone to say yes to that. It's meant to be a bridge to build to communication before you get into the interview. So even if you don't drink the water or all of it, I say yes. It's just a way for somebody to be kind to you in the moment before you sit down and have that conversation. So say yes. So in podcasting, my encouragement to people starting a show is, even if you don't need the money, say yes to the opportunity for people to give back to you, because they want to be kind. They recognize your kindness in showing up, and they want to be kind to you. So don't say no, but give them the opportunity to do something, even if it's small. And then what I would suggest to people who don't need the money, use something like Buy Me a Coffee. It's free to set up. People donate to your show. Then at the end of the year, pool all that money together and say, hey, everybody, because of you and your kind donations, thank you for being here and supporting the show. I was able to take the money you donated, and we went out to a local family that's struggling, and we bought them all presents and food and filled up their pantries, and we were able to raise a couple $1,000s to give to a family in need because of you. Now, I'm telling you, Joel, you do that in your show. I'm getting goosebumps as I say it. I am so ready to donate again, knowing that you're using it not for yourself, right? You're using it to help your community. And now I'm part of something bigger than just listening to a podcast. I'm part of Joel's community. I'm part of Joel helping a family. And my little $5 donation multiplied by thousands of people had a huge impact in someone's life because of your podcast. I'm part of something bigger, and I want to do more now. I'm going to do $10, $20 donations now because I know you're going to use it for good. Where in a world of people seemingly just want to sell us things, you're not doing that. You're doing something different with my donation that's helping somebody. So I would much rather do that with my money than anything else. So I use it as an engagement play. And in 6 months, as context, in 6 months, I've raised $4,600 through my podcast. And I don't talk about it. I don't promote it. It's not a call to action to donate to the show. It's just on my website. It's in my email signatures, just there. Hey, if you got something out of the show and you want to give back. And then what I do with my donations, again, I don't need them technically. Please keep doing it, though, if you're listening, as I then take it and I reimburse it to other podcasters. So when a podcaster that I work with sets up their Buy Me a Coffee, I am their first donation. I want you to see that email and go, holy crap, this works. There's the money. Like, it actually works, right? It's an engagement piece for me more than what you do with it. That's completely up to you. But I just think that people, when they see that they can be a part of something bigger, your podcast is amazing. And I just feel like I want that law of reciprocity. I want to give back. I want to be part of it, right? I identify with it. So how can I do that, right?
Yeah, that's a great approach. And I might honestly put that into practice now, because that's something that I was really lost on until very recently, because the whole premise of the podcast, right, was that, I didn't really know much about philosophy until I went to college. And then all of a sudden I did a college class with my professor, and I go, man, this is amazing, right? And everybody should know about this. And then now my college professor is my resident expert. He's the guy that I do the podcast with. And just trying to replicate those conversations that we had in the classroom. And so I guess there's this temptation to think that, like, all right, we're having this conversation and it's just me and Norm, right? And we're just talking philosophy and whatever. Yeah, I hit distribute, but what? I don't really care if there's anybody listening. But the show is founded on the listeners, right? They are the bedrock, the foundation of the podcast. And you're right. I think that the engagement, right? I think what made me realize that was I got an email one day about, from a stranger that said, hey, you should cover this topic. And to this day, I don't even know how they got my email address, right? I had no idea. But that all of a sudden I went, so the people out there listening, they have things they want to hear us talk about too. I'm like, I got to make a way for them to at least suggest topics so that we can cover them. Like if we're not doing that, then there's just people. And then when I was talking about it, one of my friends said to me, "Oh yeah, man, there's sometimes I'm listening to the podcast and I'm just yelling at the speaker, 'Hey, why don't you talk about this?'" And there's, you
Yeah.
know, he has the benefit of being my friend, so he can just say it to me. But the listeners out there, yeah, people want to be involved, right? They're engaged with your topic, and to them, they want to be a part of it. And so, whatever way you can, in order to make that happen, it's a part of being a responsible podcaster, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And imagine I'm going on college university campus. I'm going to the bookstore to buy my books for class. I walk up to the counter to pay, and I'm like, man, Jesus, these books are expensive. I'm going to have to eat Kraft KD or something this week. I'm going to be eating hot dogs because I got to pay for these books. Walk up to the counter, and they're like, Joel and his podcast paid, they did a credit here at the store. These books are free for you. Hang on. What? Well, Joel is a podcaster and he collects money through his podcast and he's donated to the bookstore and we're allowed to give you your books for free. Enjoy your class. What? Well, your philosophy class, come on, right? Those are unexpected things that you could do with your show that really, again, you don't need the money. Fine. That's great. But maybe there's an opportunity there somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just for your consideration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't even really thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other part that I use as well, and anybody that's been around my show longer than 5 minutes knows how I'm going to say this, is I use SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com. It's a free service as well. You get 90 seconds with this SpeakPipe thing, and you can put it everywhere, and it's a chance to get voice messages from your audience, which I then take and I input into my show. So I'll get a message from Joel. Joel's like, "Hey, Dave, a question for you in the podcast, blah, 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 blah." So I'd bring your message in, I play the message, and then I respond to it. So now you're in my show. And as a non-podcaster listener, I don't understand how all this works, but I just heard my voice on your podcast, Joel. I'm going to tell you that I'm sharing it with everyone, even my aunt who doesn't even know what a podcast is. I'm sharing it with everyone because I'm on Joel's podcast. My voice is on a podcast. Magic things have happened in the heavens. Somehow I ended up there. But I'm going to play it over and over and over. I'm going to share with everybody because I somehow made it onto your show. And my question caught your attention. My voice is there, right? And being that audio experience, to hear me on your show is just another level of engagement that I don't think we can do anywhere else to this degree. So again, that's SpeakPipe. So between donating through Buy Me a Coffee as an engagement play and then SpeakPipe as an engagement play, that's how I'm building my community. And for me, because I'm a podcast about podcasting, when someone leaves me a voice message through my SpeakPipe on my website, I create a little mini episode about their show. I go grab their trailer. I listen to their podcast. I give them a quick little encouraging review of their show. Tell everybody in my podcast community, go listen to Joel's podcast. It's awesome. And then I play a little clip of your show and I make you a mini episode, 2-3 minutes. I include your voice message, your trailer, and I just create an episode just about you. I've had people come back to me, Joel, from Australia, around the world going, crying and laughing, kind of like, I can't believe you did this. Thank you. And then they get a bump and listens, and all my audience goes and listens to them, gives them feedback, supports them. It's podcasting done right in community, right? And I get to shine the light on them in that moment.
Yeah, I've never even heard of SpeakPipe, and now I'm really excited. I got to go look that up. No, because that's what I'm trying to do in my local community here. Is we had a cable network television, right? Local cable access television media company that obviously that doesn't exist anymore. And so being involved in the local government, they said, "Hey, would you mind trying to resurrect this thing and bring it into the 21st century?" I said, "Sure." So I'm dipping my toe into video podcasting, right? And that's the whole premise behind it is just, the reason that the company petered out wasn't because what it was doing wasn't working, right? Because I remember being a kid, and if my parents' friend was on, the cable access TV show, watching the TV and going, "Whoa, this guy that I know is on TV," right? It's the same thing today. It's just different technology, right? If I can do a video podcast in the community and bring people on to talk about their business or to talk about what they're doing in the community, they're going to tell all their friends, right? Everybody's going to be, and then it's going to spread word of mouth. People are going to say, oh, well, maybe I can get on and talk about this cause that I'm working for, right? And then that way it creates more engagement in the community, more awareness of what kinds of things are going on. And, just a healthy atmosphere of, the good things that are happening in the world and how people can be involved in being a part of it.
Well, that's how Wayne and Garth got their start, right? So Wayne's World, party on. Excellent, right? It's all through that.
Yeah.
So I love it. I know you're going to be on Alex Sanfilippo's podcast, which is exciting, and I love listening to that show. Big shout out to Alex, again, creator of PodMatch, the reason why we're here. But can you give us a little tiny sneak peek into what you talked about on there? I don't want to steal Alex's thunder on his show, obviously, but can you share a little bit about the context of what you talked about on an upcoming episode of Alex's podcast?
Yeah. So I matched with him through PodMatch, right? And at first I was like, this can't be right. Is this real? And I messaged him, and he's done like 600 something episodes. And I said, I don't know what kind of new thing I can talk about that hasn't been talked about before. I said, but I'm working on a PhD in psychology. My podcast is on philosophy. I said, so I think that something that would be beneficial is, talking about the philosophy of podcasting, right? Because one thing about being on PodMatch is that you come into contact with many different types of people, many different types of podcasters, right? And I've got 5-star reviews across the board, right? Both guest and host. But even that being said, some interviews are more of a struggle than others, right? And I just think to myself, well, why is that, right? Is it inexperience, or is it, So I basically created the video, which will be part of his podcasting Made Simple podcast, just talking about how as a podcast guest, because I was in charge of the guest track, you can ask yourself questions that sort of highlight where you fit in the podcast ecosystem, right? How you should approach different things, right? Because especially if you're somebody like me who has a bunch of different interests, right? Okay, podcasting, music, art, psychology, business, all across the board. You can get matched with a bunch of different types of hosts, right? It's important to know what those people are expecting from you, and so you have to know that going in. And I've run into that in PodMatch, being matched with people where I go, okay, this guy came out onto my show, and it's pretty obvious he never listened to it, and he doesn't know what it is that we do here. Or I've gone onto other people's shows, and I've read the bio and I've listened to a couple episodes, and then I get in, then they've changed it up completely, right? Rather than doing what they normally do, it's now just an interview show. They just want to talk to me about my life, So knowing what your approach is, knowing what you have to offer, knowing what the audience and the host are expecting, and just kind of where you fit in. So that's sort of what the talk is about, is using philosophy to sort of question yourself, all those things that you take for granted about why you are a podcaster, or what you believe about yourself and your place in the podcast ecosystem, kind of examining them a little bit further and coming up with some more concrete answers.
So the joy of doing this podcast is it's not really interview based. Sometimes it feels a little interview based, but I love the fact that I can turn the keys over to you. I'm going to move over to the passenger seat now and you drive. Joel, talk to the podcaster listening. They're brand new. This show is called How to Podcast. It's kind of in the name. Talk to the podcaster listening who's kind of struggling. Maybe they're the introverts like you and I, or they're trying to find their voice in podcasting, their early days. They're looking to start, and they're looking to you as an expert in the room with the numerous episodes you have. Your words of words of encouragement and kind of helping them get started. I'm moving to the passenger seat, your podcast now.
All right.
You're driving. So what would you like to say to them? How can we encourage them today?
Yeah, I mean, there's several different fronts you can look at. One is the technical side. So like I said, I'm starting a new podcast for my community. And I'm a volunteer, right? So it's not funded. So part of that was trying to find like the cheapest, easiest, setup to be moved, that sort of thing. And I was able to do it for under $1,000, right? I was able to get an HP laptop for $300, Samsung Q2U microphones, which have USB, XLR, and headphone jacks for $60 a piece. A little Scarlett 2i2, and then cables, and that's it. And that's all you need to have a professional podcast. And part of the reason is, I'll tell you why. When I got into podcasting, the reason I started it really was just because I was a musician, a recording musician to start with. So I looked around, I said, I've got all the recording equipment. I might as well start a podcast, right? And so I started with my philosophy professor. But things have changed since then, right? In just those 6 years, you have a lot of tools at your disposal as a new person. And one of the biggest one, the game-changing one recently that I've discovered is AI. AI can mix your podcast better than I can as a mixing and mastering engineer. And that hurts me in my soul to say, but it makes me so happy for new people, right? Because you can get a professional sounding podcast. So what I like to use is it's a website called Auphonics, AUPHONICS. And it's, you have to pay, but they give you 2 free hours a month of mixing. So you just upload your file, the AI mixes it in just a few seconds, gives it back to you. It's a professional sounding podcast. So if your podcast is half an hour and you do it once a week, you can do it for free. You don't even have to pay them, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a little bit longer, you can buy a subscription. You can buy single credits, so you don't have to do a subscription. It's unethical, but you could create several different accounts to log in under and have 2 hours. I do not.
Don't try this at home.
Right. Yeah. But the point is, that even there was one episode that I did with my phone. Right, you and I were talking about it before the show. There's new people out there starting a podcast with nothing but a phone. Right, they're talking into. I did an episode that one time just in this really reflective, bouncy room, and it was me and 2 other people, and we recorded it. And this is actually the Disney Princesses episode, surprisingly enough. And I posted it, and it just sounded terrible. Nothing that I could do as a semi-professional mix engineer could get it to sound good. Well, a year later, I found Auphonics, right? And I uploaded the file. And you can go and listen to it for yourself, right? From nowhere to nothing, Disney Princesses, listen to it. And it sounds like it was recorded in my studio under ideal conditions. It's just fantastic. So, from the technical side, under $1,000, really, if you have a phone and you follow the website that I just said, you can have a professional sounding podcast, right? On the other side of it, really the only thing that matters is that you're talking about something that's important to you. And that's it, right? Because like we were talking about before, if you're starting from the notion of, what's my niche going to be? Or how am I going to make money? Or how am I going to do that? None of those are proper motivations for starting to podcast. Those can all be considerations that come afterwards if those are things that are important to you. But you have to start from, what do I want to talk about? Otherwise, you'll never be able to sustain yourself, right? So philosophy is something that I am wildly passionate about, right? So no matter what else is going wrong, if my listens are down, or if I was using it to make money and I wasn't making money, or if anything went wrong, right? It wouldn't matter, because when I started out just because I wanted to have these conversations. And then the only reason it's a podcast is because I thought, you know what, maybe somebody else out there wants to hear these conversations. Maybe somebody else wants to be in on it. Do you want to know what? 6 years later, if I looked at it and the listens were still 0, I'd still be submitting it. I'd still be putting it up there. And Norm and I would still be getting together and talking every week, because this is what we love to do, right? It has to be something that you love to do, and then all the other stuff comes after it. And so as far as new podcasters, those are my 2 words of advice, right? Is just make sure that you're starting with something that you love to do. Don't worry about whether it's oversaturated or whether you have a niche or whatever it is. Those things will work themselves out through the authenticity that you bring to the topic, through your passion and the way that you approach it. And then on the technical side, which tends to be very daunting for new people, like I said, look up Auphonics, and it doesn't even matter what equipment you have anymore. It'll make it sound good. So with those 2 things, you can conquer the podcasting world, or at least you can feel like you are, because it's something that means something to you, and you're creating a product that sounds mostly professional, I
love it. Okay, we'll have links to all that, obviously, as we do in podcasting, in the show notes. think that's the default setting we have to say in every episode. As far as usual, what's coming up in the podcast down the road? What are you excited about? And maybe where should we start listening to your show? At the beginning, middle, new? Where should we start?
Yeah, the beauty of the show is you could really just kind of scroll through the episodes and find what's interesting to you and listen to it. If you want to start all the way at the beginning, you can. What you will hear is a new person struggling to establish a podcast, right? Because I'd never done it before, right? So you can hear us over time become more comfortable and settle into a bit of a routine and get better at it. I think the show is much, much better now than it was at the beginning. But part of the show is highlighting how hard it is to do philosophy, right? So if, we're saying ums and ahs, or we're pausing, or 1 minute I'm saying something, then the next minute I'm finding something that contradicts it and revising my opinion. That's all part of philosophy. That's all part of thinking. That's what you need to do to come to new knowledge and to grow. So we don't edit any of the episodes. I'm not going to go back and pull the old episodes that sound bad and replace them or anything like that. So if you want to follow through the whole journey, you can, but you'll get a much more polished result with the more recent episodes. But yeah, you can, like I said, scroll through, listen to what interests you, and go from there. But did that answer your question? Was there another?
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Yeah, there was. I did the wrong thing and asked you two things. Just maybe what's coming up down in the future as well, like any future guests, any future topics that you're working on right now that we can look forward to.
Yeah. So Norm and I, we have a note that we share back and forth with ideas for future episodes. But it seems like the note's almost never touched because every week while we're talking, we come up with something to go to next, right? So we talked about causality, right? What starts things off the week before last. And during that talk, we mereology came up, which is the study of how parts make up a whole, right? Which is sort of a natural continuation of causality. And then out of that, our episode coming up this week is going to be on personhood, right? Because when you think about parts making up a whole, you think about the cells in your body. And an interesting fact is that actually by weight, you're more other organisms than you, right? If you weighed all the bacteria and all of the things in your body, it's actually more heavy than the stuff that is the cells that are you. So what are you?
Oh, my brain.
Yeah. What are you, right? So personhood is next. So yeah, we jump around quite a bit. There's no roadmap, right? We're from nowhere to nothing. We take it 1 week at a time, but we have a pretty good backlog of things.
I love it. Okay, so as far as connecting with you, Joel, the podcast, the website, any of that stuff that we can go to, where should we go?
Yeah, so from nowhere to nothing podcast at gmail.com. It's a really short, succinct email address, but you can go there. You can feel free to ask us a question. You can shoot us a topic. We'll cover it, usually sooner rather than later. But if not, we'll get to it eventually. There's the podcast site. There is a Facebook page. It requires some looking to get to, but if you can find us and you wanna follow along, we'll accept you. That's other than that, like I said, world's worst marketer. So
there's lots of opportunity, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Let's spin that. There's lots of opportunity for you ahead. I love it. So it's good. Joel, thank you so much for doing this, for being on the show. If you have time in the future, come back. I'd love to get an update from you on the podcast and your journey. Maybe if there's an opportunity to add your buy me a coffee or a speak pipe, let me know. Okay. Because I would, as a listener and part of your community, I would love to come and support you in that as a listener. So let me know if that ever does come out down the road. I would love to be one of your first donations and first voice messages. That would be great. But thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for being on PodMatch. And Alex, I know he's probably listening. I think if you snap your fingers 2 times, Alex and Filippo appears. So Alex, if you're listening, thank you for creating PodMatch, because now I have Joel in my life. I have a new podcast to fall in love with and a new partner in podcasting. So it's all because of Alex. It's all your fault, Alex. Thank you so much for doing this. Joel, thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate all the tips you had. And it's really been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Everyone, all the information in the show notes as always. Joel, thank you so much. Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. And I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope you're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.